All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Alan here at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and you are joining us for another gaming live stream, an educational gaming live stream with us. And I am joined by two very special guests from our conservation science team. We have Cristian and Josh joining us today. And we're going to be talking about all things kelp, some of the research that we do here at the aquarium, what our conservation science team does. And so thank you so much for joining us here. And without further ado, Cristian and Josh, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I can start us off. Hi, everybody. My name is Cristian Hernandez Diaz. I am so happy to be back here joining you all. With another educational live stream. For folks who may not remember, I'm the outreach manager on our U.S. and California ocean conservation team. I work within conservation and science, where we are working on things like fisheries and aquaculture on the global side, global plastic work as well, which I was talking about last time that I was here. And I'm also joined by a very special guest because there's a big R in conservation and science, which is research. So with that hopeful great introduction, I'd like to pass it over to Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Cristian. Hi, everyone. I'm Josh. I am an ocean conservation research scientist at Monterey Bay Aquarium. I'm a marine ecologist, and my research here focuses on kelp forests, which we're going to have a discussion on here in a bit.
Yeah, and hopefully for folks in the chat, we are trying, keyword trying to find the kelp forest. So if folks know where that is and know aspects of that, like the coordinates, maybe here's the map for those who've played previously. Let us know. Any kelp would be greatly appreciated. Drop that in the chat.
There's got to be a kelp forest in here.
Yeah.
So if you haven't joined us before, we are playing Endless Ocean Luminous on the Nintendo Switch. This is a game that's all about diving, and we thought this was a really great game to be playing today because Josh does a lot of diving with his work and some of his research. So diving into what you both all do, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do in conservation science? What does that kind of division and department do here at the aquarium?
Yeah, I can start us off. Maybe I think I have the best and easiest job at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. I get to talk to people all across the aquarium as well as online about all of the amazing work that's happening in conservation and science, all the way up from our global plastics treaty work to our work here at the local and state level, as well as our research as well. And people and folks on our team like Dr. Smith here make my job so easy because they're doing constant, great stuff for ocean conservation. Yeah.
Yeah, and like Cristian said, we do research at Monterey Bay Aquarium, and so it's something that is a little behind the scenes. And my role here at Monterey Bay Aquarium is to do research, and so the research we do here helps inform ways that we can implement conservation practices, policy, and so yeah, there's a whole bunch of research happening here at Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Yeah, Josh, can you tell us where is your research currently taking place for folks who may not know? Because like you said, it's definitely happening behind the scenes or in most cases underwater.
Yeah. Well, if you've ever been to Monterey Bay Aquarium and looked out off the back deck, there's a huge kelp forest. And what most people see right from the surface is the kelp canopy. It's the part of kelp that's reached the surface. And we actually have a whole kelp forest exhibit at Monterey Bay Aquarium where you can see what's below the surface. So I study kelp forest.
That was swimming a little close to me.
Also, right off the back deck.
That's right.
We've been seeing them a lot lately.
Yeah, I have seen 2 underwater in Monterey.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? That's kind of a rare thing to be able to do as a diver, right?
Yeah, when it happened the first time, it was sort of quite a special moment.
Yeah.
And then it happened a second time, and I thought, wow.
You got something going. You just flip the switch for the whales to come by.
Yeah. Kelp forests are really productive ecosystems, and typically the water is doesn't look like it does here. It's
Sure.
typically very green. There's a lot of plankton. And so seeing a big whale underwater
Right.
means you typically have to be pretty close to
Close.
it in order to see it.
What was visibility like? Because I know in Monterey Bay, it's not generally great most of the time.
Yeah, so actually on both occasions, the visibility was about 15 feet. And it was sort
So
of...
that whale was
Yeah,
was
it's
that
like
close.
all of a sudden, oh my gosh, this thing is coming at me, and
What do
the
you
initial
do?
reaction is, what is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then they just kind of turned, and I saw the eye for both whales, and it's like, oh wow,
That's-
it's a whale.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Really
I
cool.
probably would have made my wetsuit very warm in that moment. But that's pretty amazing. Any other cool things that you get to see out there?
Oh my gosh, diving in a kelp forest is just incredible. It's really uncommon to find any bare rock because something is growing on it. Some kind of invertebrate, a sponge, or some kind of marine algae. And so there's a lot of really what we call cryptic things to look at, things that you really have to search for. We have hundreds of different species of animals and marine algae in our kelp forests.
So when you're doing this research, like what are the things that you're looking for? What are you noting? Are you looking for like numbers of things, diversity? What are you looking at?
Yeah, well, there's two really broad things that we look at. One is biodiversity. This is the number of animals and marine algae that we see. And we were curious about how that may change over time. And then we're also interested in this idea of the functioning of the ecosystem. This is like, what are the different animals that live in the kelp forest actually doing? Are they photosynthesizers? Are they primary consumers? Are they eating the plants, the things that photosynthesize? Or are they predators? And so we're collecting information about both of those things, the biodiversity and the ecosystem functioning. And that tells us about the overall health of the ecosystem.
Very cool. And what would you say is the kelp forest overall? Would you say it is a healthy ecosystem here in California, or does it kind of depend?
Well, kelp forests actually are found all around the world in different regions. They actually cover about a third of the world's coastlines.
Really?
And most of the kelps around the world are actually non-canopy forming. So we talked earlier about the part of the kelp that's reached the surface. Those are canopy forming kelps. But most kelps only grow a few feet off the surface of the reef. And these are some of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet, much like a rainforest. There are, in our kelp forest here in California, there was a study done about 50 years ago that showed in Southern California there was over 800 animals and 130 species of marine algae. That was 50 years ago. So
Yeah, sure.
very diverse ecosystems. But in California and in other places around the world, kelp forests have really changed over the last decade.
And what has been causing those changes, and what are some of those changes that are happening in the kelp forest?
Yeah, well, a major driver of change was this, in California, was this marine heat wave that we had 10 years ago. And the reason we're not seeing kelp right here is because the water is very warm. This is a coral reef. Kelp forests need really cold, nutrient-rich water to thrive. And so back in 2014 and in 2016, we had a serious marine heat wave that was driven in part by climate change in California. And this created really poor environmental conditions for kelp. So that set off this widespread loss of kelp forests. And around that same time, we also had an outbreak of sea urchins. These are these baseball-sized animals covered in spines that like to eat kelp.
Spiky hedgehogs,
Yeah.
underwater hedgehogs. Yep.
and I am working on trying to find this kelp forest.
I know. Wait, we gotta look at that. Where are we on the map here?
Let's see. Chat, please, kelp.
Kelp us,
see,
help us find kelp.
We are off course.
We are off
You've got
course.
exploring quite a bit.
I apparently have. Yeah, we started, just for folks, we started over in the IJ quadrant, and I have found myself now in the DE76 area. I thought I was getting close because I was seeing things that I recognize here in Monterey Bay, like, well, not here anymore, but I saw a mola mola, and I was like, oh, I wonder if I can follow them.
Follow them to the kelp forest.
To the kelp forest, right?
Just to the kelp forest.
Oh, no, we're not going in there.
Yeah, we've been there before.
Yeah.
So this, you're talking about this kind of warm water blob, and some of the effects that it's had, and we've seen it here in Monterey Bay, right? We've seen some of these animals, fishes, and things like that are normally found only in Southern California or southern than that, all of a sudden are showing up here in Monterey Bay.
Yeah.
And that's not something that we were expecting. And so can you tell us a little bit more about what you are looking at now, kind of based off of that?
Yeah, well, like you said, there's just been a lot of changes. We're seeing overall less kelp than we saw 10 years ago. We're seeing a lot more sea urchins. And because there is less kelp, that means it's really hard for the animals that depend on kelp for survival and food. It makes it really hard for them to continue to persist.
Right.
But like you said, we've also seen animals moving northward. So for mobile animals like fish that can move, we've actually seen an influx of species that are typically found in much warmer water.
Do you have any examples of those that we usually wouldn't find necessarily here in Monterey Bay, but we're starting to see more of?
Yeah, so one is this fish called senorita. And these are fish that are typically found in Southern California, down in Baja. After the marine heat wave, we saw this huge influx of them. And we were just out diving last week, and we saw a whole bunch.
Oh, wow.
A few other fish, like sheephead, is a really big fish that actually likes to eat sea urchins.
Okay.
They're typically found, again, in Southern California, down in Baja. We've seen a lot more of them as well.
And is the Garibaldi also another one of those? Or is
We've not seen any Garibaldi.
Oh, okay.
Garibaldi. Yeah,
Up here.
yeah,
Okay.
not up here.
Okay. Interesting.
That would be really unusual. If anyone sees a Garibaldi,
You got some
Monterey
issues.
Bay, yeah, we need to know about it.
Okay. You got that. So, Chad, if you're out there diving, you can let us know. if you
Yeah,
happen
in
to
this
see
moment
those.
right now.
So what does that research kind of look like when you're out there diving and you're underwater, you're looking at kelp forests? What are some of those things that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, being in a kelp forest is a lot like being in a redwood forest on land, except there's life everywhere. You can find life growing on the surface of the reef, all the way up the water column, all the way to the surface. So it's a really just awesome ecosystem to explore. And I started diving kelp forests here around the Monterey Bay over a decade ago. And so I've been able to experience, like many other people have as well, a lot of these ecosystem changes. And things just look far different than they did 10 years ago.
Can you kind of describe, and I think we actually have some video clips, Krista, if you want to bring those up for us. Maybe talk about what a normal kelp forest should look like, or what are the things that you would expect in what, quote unquote, a normal kelp forest should look like.
Yeah, so in a kelp forest, mentioned this earlier, that it's really hard to find any bare rock on the reef surface. There's something occupying all of the space, whether it's some kind of invertebrate or marine algae, and then there's just fish everywhere. And in a kelp forest, we tend to see lots of different kinds of marine algae, not just kelp, but other kinds of like foliose, macroalgae, red algae, green algae, and in these, what we call sea urchin barrens, the places where the urchins have just basically consumed most of the algae, then we see far less diversity in these areas.
Yeah. And I'm assuming, too, you're just seeing just less of everything, right? So less numbers overall and less diversity, or?
Yeah, less numbers of some things.
Okay.
But what's really happened here is the Monterey Peninsula has shifted to this mosaic of remnant forests that have stuck it out this entire time, and also these sea urchin barrens. And so on a single dive, it's possible to be swimming through this incredible healthy kelp forest and then to enter a sea urchin barren where it's just like a carpet of purple sea urchins all over the reef.
And just bare rocks then.
And a lot of bare rock. And that's what's really unusual.
Interesting.
The urchins, after they've eaten all of the kelp and the other macroalgae, they will actually scrape bare rock. And so in these urchin barrens is one of the few places where I've actually seen bare rock in a place that used to be a kelp forest, and that's really concerning.
Wow, they're really hungry for something out there then.
Yeah, they're really hungry. What's really remarkable is how they can, what's happening?
Yeah, I was like,
Did you find the kelp forest? Wait.
Whoa.
Sorry, go
hold
back
on.
to that. As you approached the ancient disc, it felt as though someone's voice, coming from a long ways off, was echoing inside your head. Return here while swimming aside that which lives in this expanse. Chat, you got anything for us, chat?
Yeah.
That was very deep. Like the ocean. I think there's a way to get the animals to swim with you. But I'm not sure what the answer to this riddle would be. That which lives in this expanse. I feel like that could literally be anything.
yeah.
Interesting. Well, yeah. Chad, if you got anything for us, let us know.
I feel like this leopard
Whipray
has something to do with it.
Scan it and then press the plus. Maybe. Oh, you don't have capacity to dive with a creature. How do we get more capacity?
Yeah.
Do you come up with this when you go diving? You need more capacity? Oh, interesting. Well, we'll keep exploring.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I'm trying here to see if I can find something. I think I've discovered 57% of the map now.
Hey, that's pretty good. Just need to find that kelp forest. If it exists, we'll find it. There's another whale.
Oh, look, we've seen 2 whales.
Yeah.
There you go. See, you've matched what you've seen in real life. Have you seen a mola underwater?
I have seen them all.
You have.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's super.
Oh,
Cool.
yeah.
That's a lot of fun too.
They get really big. And they can also swim very fast.
So what
If they are motivated.
what was your experience with them? Was it one or was there?
I've seen them kind of just one off, and also in where I've seen a whole bunch of them at one time.
A guacamolas? You've seen a guacamola?
Is that what it is?
That's what we've called it.
Oh,
So we've decided. That's pretty amazing. There was I remember I think it was like beginning of the pandemic, and there was in Monterey Wharf, and there was a whole group of the mini molas just all hanging out, like the ones that are like, dinner plate size. That would have been amazing just to dive in and just be swimming around with them, all cruising around with you.
yeah. There's a place in Carmel Bay where the canyon comes in really close to shore, and you can dive on the edge of the canyon.
Oh,
And
interesting.
in the fall, typically molas will come through there, and on a really clear day, the visibility here is not always 50 feet. You do have days where the visibility is 60 feet or more.
Sure.
So
Oh,
those
wow.
are really special days, and I've seen molas kind of cruising along the canyon wall over there.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, I just gotta say, Monterey Bay is really amazing, just in terms of the diversity, all the different animals that you can see, all the different animals that are migrating through. And yeah, just the opportunities to see diving, to see 2 whales, to be able to see the mola molas underwater. That's pretty awesome. So if anyone's out there wanting to go diving, check out Monterey Bay. I know when I first moved here, I was going to school in Hawaii, and I had moved here, and everyone's like, go diving. You should go diving here. I'm like, why? It's all murky. It's brown. Why do I want to be in with a bunch of algae? And once you get under there, it's amazing. You can see like our ocean sunfish right here. Very cool.
And was this approximately the scale, Josh, or was it smaller, bigger? Here, I'll swim
Go
right
right
up
by
next
it.
to it.
Yeah, oh, I actually swam through it.
Yeah. Enter the 5th dimension.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do get very large.
Look at that face. Such a good face. All right. So going back to kind of your research and I guess your work just in general, what's a typical day like for you, or is there a typical day?
Yeah, well, so right now we just finished up our field season for this year. So we typically don't dive over the winter because the conditions get really rough. You get a lot of really big swell, and it's hard to get out on the water.
Hard to coordinate.
And go diving.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we typically dive over the summer. And so for the last 4 months, my schedule or my sort of daily schedule has just been going out diving every day.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people out there would love that as their job.
Yeah.
And so is it all the same kind of type of research that you're doing with all the dives, or are you involved in a couple of different projects, or what are you trying to, I guess, determine and figure out with this research?
Yeah, so the diving work, this is actually the first summer of field work as part of a new project that we're doing here at Monterey Bay Aquarium, where we're interested in looking at mechanisms of kelp recovery. So we talked about the loss of kelp forest that we've seen over the last 10 years, and there has not really been any evidence of widespread natural kelp forest recovery. And so we're interested in understanding what those mechanisms of recovery might be.
Sure. Now, I know that we did release a paper recently from the sea otter side of things, and that was looking at the kelp forest coverage in California over the past century or so. And as you kind of mentioned, there's been a pretty steep decline across the state in terms of that kelp forest coverage. But here on the Central Coast, we have what has at least not gone in a decline. There's some areas that may have gone and actually increased in kelp coverage. And the paper is saying that sea otters are kind of responsible for that, or they're very, very closely tied together. Can you speak to that at all? Obviously, you work with kelp forests, and otters spend a lot of time with it.
Yeah. And in fact, over the last few years, there's been a few different papers looking at the role of sea otters in kelp forests, kelp persistence. And what we've seen along the Monterey Peninsula is that kelp forests since 2014 have declined by about 70%, maybe a little more.
Wow.
But then north of San Francisco, up to the Oregon border, where there are no sea otters, kelp forests have declined by over 90%.
Oh,
wow.
This is a huge loss.
That's a huge number.
So we had
a huge squid. Sorry.
Yeah, look at that.
What is that? Is that a giant squid? That is
Giant
a giant
squid.
Appropriately named. Those eyes are a little creepy though. Whoa. Yeah.
I've not seen
I don't
one of
like
these.
Yeah,
It'd
I don't
probably
like that.
indicator that we're too deep.
Yeah. Or in the wrong area. So you can see my little line of like where I was going.
Circling around.
Don't mind me as I'm intensely trying to find this kelp forest.
We'll get there.
We
I
will.
believe in you.
Keep thinking higher latitudes. We got to get some cold
Yeah.
water.
Yeah, I say, well, every now and then I get fooled by the mola just because, like you said, you've seen them out occasionally while you're diving, and I'm like, oh, this is a good sign. I'm near. And then I get misled.
So then the question is, have you seen sea otters while you've gone diving?
Right. We don't tend to see too many otters underwater. They tend to avoid divers.
Probably for good reason.
Yeah, probably best. But we do see them at the surface.
Okay.
Yeah, often resting in kelp canopy, and sea otters certainly use kelp as part of their habitat. And sea otters have really positive benefits on kelp forests.
Yeah.
And so that paper we were talking about earlier showed that sea otters actually help to keep sea urchin numbers low enough in the kelp forest to enable that kelp to continue to persist and to thrive.
Sure. Now, we've talked about sea otters being keystone predators, keystone species being really important. But as you've talked about, kelp forest is a very complex ecosystem. And so there are other animals that are involved as well. And one of those was the sunflower star. And we saw a steep decrease in those numbers following that warm water blob that you were talking about. Is that something that you're also kind of looking into, or what can you kind of say about that?
Yeah, so that is another event that happened around the same time as the marine heat wave. We had this sea star wasting event. It was actually 1 year before the heat wave in 2013. So we had the sea star wasting event first.
Okay.
And this was catastrophic for many different species of sea stars. One is the sunflower sea star. And this is a sea star that grows to be big, like the size of a
Many
big
arms,
pizza.
right?
Yeah,
Like-
like 24 arms, and they cruise around the reef surface eating snails and a bunch of different invertebrates, including sea urchins. Since 2013, I have not seen a single individual here. They are gone. And so that's really concerning.
Yeah.
And so the loss of that species very likely had
Sorry, that's a crown of thorns.
a
Or is
crown of
that-
thorns.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
that's a crown of thorns.
Speaking
Yeah,
of sea stars.
oh, cool.
Is that a big isopod next to it?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's
Wait.
that's a slipper lobster.
Oh yeah, it is.
But it does have that kind of isopod shape.
I saw from the side. So I thought,
Good isopod.
I don't know if folks can hear this. I thought it was the breathing that was really loud. Like, I was like, am I breathing really loudly? And then it's the diver. Yeah. Yeah. I was like,
It's good. It's very accurate.
Yeah.
Depiction.
Certainly not how long I've been diving, right, Josh? Like, that is not accurate in the distance I've traveled to the work that you are doing in the ocean, right?
You need a bigger tank.
yeah. Maybe a dive buddy too.
Yeah, dive buddy especially. Yeah, this feels
This feels
for
unsafe.
Yeah,
I
for
think
so
you should
many
be doing this.
reasons.
You've been underwater for way too long.
Yeah.
You did no safety stops whatsoever.
Yeah.
But there are these limitations with doing the type of research we do underwater.
Sure.
We're limited in time that we have to actually be collecting data. We're limited by the amount of air that we have available,
Right.
And also the amount of bottom time, because we can't stay down for too long. Yeah.
So I was gonna ask, what's your usual depth, I guess, when you're diving? Because certainly kelp forests are only within a certain depth range. So what's your depth range usually for diving?
Yeah, so we're typically diving less than 60 feet.
Okay.
We don't tend to see kelp forests growing much deeper than 80 feet or so. But now, most of the deeper areas around the Monterey Peninsula are urchin barrens. So we've actually seen this kind of shallow water compression of forests.
Interesting.
So yeah, we're typically diving 60 feet or less.
Very cool. And so, I get from you that you're very passionate about this work. You're passionate about the ecosystem. What kind of got you into that work, and what got you into your position here at the aquarium?
Yeah, so I actually learned to dive here
Oh,
in
cool.
Monterey Bay.
Okay.
And I grew up at a place nowhere near the ocean. And it was actually during my undergrad that I had an opportunity to go scuba diving, just recreational scuba diving. But it was actually taught as a course
Oh, cool.
in college.
Sure. Yeah.
So I was able to take that. And on my first dive, it was right here in Monterey Bay. The visibility was about 5 feet.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Super surgy. The water was not calm at all. And I just thought it was the coolest thing.
There you go.
I
You were hooked.
I want to keep doing this. I don't know what I'm gonna do, but like I want
This is
to
it.
keep diving, and just this is just such a cool ecosystem.
That's awesome.
And so from there, I had a lot of mentors in college who encouraged me to really think about science and continuing with a career in research. And so I went to grad school and got my PhD, and then did a postdoc, and I've been going to school for a long time.
Yeah. That's usually the case with
lot of
research,
school.
right?
Yeah.
It's nonstop almost, right?
Yeah.
And so how did that then get you to the aquarium?
Yeah, so I've been studying kelp forest throughout graduate school, then as a postdoc after graduate school. And the aquarium, of course, really is involved in kelp forest conservation. And so I came here to the aquarium to look at the project that we talked about, which is mechanisms of kelp forest recovery. And so this is active research we're doing right now. We just completed our first summer of field work. We're going to be doing it all again next summer.
Cool.
And now that we're moving into the into fall and winter, we're going to be doing a lot of data analysis. So the results are forthcoming, and we'll see what we find.
So are you finding, is this like a long tail of a project? Like this first summer is really just kind of setting the baseline, and you're going to continue building on this? And how long do you think this kind of project will go?
Yeah, well, we certainly hope to keep building on it. The questions that we are asking all lead to additional questions.
Sure, yeah.
And so we have more questions now than when we started.
Sure.
And this initially started as a 2-year project. So 2 years of data collection specifically for this set of questions. And so we're 1 year in now, but we are certainly already thinking about, okay, how can we start moving towards the next set of questions that we have?
Very cool. And then is that, getting to Cristian, is that where do you get involved with some of the research and some of the work that they're doing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my job is probably, I think, the best job at the aquarium, but also Josh diving,
I mean, that's pretty
doing
cool.
that is pretty cool
Seeing
as
whales,
well.
I mean.
Yeah, seeing whales,
Hard to
mola
beat that.
molas, pretty jealous here. But I work with Dr. Smith and the rest of the research and science team at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and I work on that storytelling piece, right? So taking all of the work that they're doing underwater and bringing that up to the surface to our audiences. Within our conservation and science team as well, we work with policymakers, and we use all of that research to inform decision making up on state level, local level, and even federal level as well. So while I'm not in the ocean diving every day, I'm at a cubicle in an office, meeting with Josh, meeting with the rest of the science team. And working on some of those stories, as well as working with folks here in this room right now that are behind the scenes, as well as yourself, on some of that, engagement on our social medias as well.
Yeah, so shout out again to all my teammates here behind the scenes. We've got Christine, Emily, and Krista. We couldn't do the stream without them, so big thanks, big kudos to them. for anyone that's joining in, thank you again for joining us today. We've got our educational gaming live stream. We're playing Endless Ocean Luminous. And again, I'm joined by folks from our conservation science team. We have Cristian and Josh. And really just kind of talking about the work that conservation science, our division, is doing here at the aquarium, the effect that they're having, and really sharing with you all that we have different aspects of the aquarium that people don't always get a chance to know about or learn about or see, especially if you're just visiting the aquarium. So thank you all so much for joining us here today. We're going to continue on. And if you have questions, please throw them in the chat. We'd love to hear them. The question is, have you played Abzu? We have, back during the pandemic. I think it's been a couple years since we played that, but that might be one that we can definitely bring back and play.
We played it with the creator. You can check out the VOD on YouTube.
There we go. Thank you, Emily. If you didn't hear that, we had a lot of these gaming educational live streams. We actually had the creators of the game join us for one of the live streams. So you can find that on Twitch or YouTube, the video of the day, or in our YouTube playlist. Video of the day. Video on demand. I'm sorry. We have way too many acronyms here at the aquarium. I can't keep track of everything. We're working on it, but keep all the questions coming, chat. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Didn't waste your college education. Yes, absolutely.
Speaking of working on it, we are in fact working on finding this kelp forest on this map. So folks in the chat, yeah, if you want to drop some kelp in the chat, as they're having a great conversation about some of the impacts that our kelp forests here locally and across California and the West Coast are facing, due to the marine heat wave that took place. I've been just hyper focused on trying to find this kelp forest. So please mind my intensity over here on this side of the screen.
You've traveled a lot. Like you've made yourself over to the left corner now.
Oh, I at least hit 65%. I don't know what we started at.
You've crossed like 10 degrees of latitude. I think we have to go like 20 to 30 to find it.
Yeah. Josh, how many tanks would you say of oxygen did I just like go through and...
Well,
that amount of swimming.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amount of time.
I would love this diver's cylinder because they have not run out of gas.
Yeah.
This
Cylinder, their stamina, their lungs.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's like a bionic man or something. We need that.
Yeah, this diver and I have very opposite experiences diving, definitely.
So Josh, you talked a little bit about the schooling that you had to do. Cristian, what was your kind of background like coming into the aquarium? What got you into your role?
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of school, I thought I'd position myself by a school here. School, I actually attended undergrad with Dr. Smith, and cool. I vividly remember us both being in class together and occasionally sitting next to each other. So this feels very serendipitous for me.
That's awesome.
But I fell in love. So I come from the Bay Area, so kind of by the coast, but not really. Didn't really spend a lot of time interacting or visiting the ocean. But the chances that I did have, whether I was in the car, driving over like the Bay Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge, like I just knew that was the place to be, and there was something magical there. And so while I was in undergrad, some of us fell in love with research. Some of us did not. That's the realities of going to college and finding your passion. And I enjoyed, just much like what I'm doing right now, talking about some of the amazing work that our team does, talking about some of the stuff that's happening in our ocean, in science. And so I fell in love with like education and outreach. And so upon graduating, I took a part-time job as a summer camp counselor, and then went on to just do more work within our communities, more work within the education system. And then, timing was right, and I've came here to the Monterey Bay Aquarium and joined the conservation and science team, and I found myself, in an outreach role where I'm doing a lot of the things that I love to do for a place that just makes it so easy for me to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very cool.
That's
Thanks,
awesome.
thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Lots of love for the Bay Area in the chat. So,
Yay.
yay, Bay Area.
Well,
Sorry,
I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
What's your major, marine science?
Marine science, yeah.
This is what's so cool. I think for students who might be doing their undergrad, Cristian and I both had the same major.
Yeah.
And it can lead to a lot of different paths, right?
Yeah.
Communication, policy, or research,
Yep.
among other things.
Yeah. I also have a marine biology degree, and I thought I was I always wanted to be at an aquarium. I thought I was going to be behind the scenes working with the animals. And the path has just taken me in a lot of different directions, but I found that communication was just what really felt like it fit for me as a way to share my passion. And so it's been a lot of fun. And again, like you said, there's a lot of different opportunities, a lot of different careers, even within marine science. And also, too, there's lots of people here at the aquarium that don't have marine science degrees.
Like
and
me.
are doing lots of great work. Like Krista.
Yeah.
I had a communications degree, so nothing to do with marine or science.
But again, it definitely helps you in your day-to-day job. And we have lots of people throughout the aquarium that don't necessarily have that marine science background, but they've got a passion for the ocean, and a love for it, and wanting to get the word out, get education out. So wherever you are in your path, if you want to be associated with the ocean, you absolutely can be. It doesn't have to be marine science, doesn't have to be marine biology. You can find your way to an aquarium or to research or to conservation. So lots of opportunities out there. Very cool. I have to point out, someone had pointed out in the chat, OMG Cristian, you're going around that map with the thoroughness of a Roomba. I'm impressed. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's such a great...
Thank you so much. Yeah, that has been my role on this live stream today. If folks have been picking up in the chat, I'm definitely using my context clues of the Monterey Bay to find said kelp forest. As an example, here we are, open ocean-ish. I'm gonna turn around.
Yeah.
That's not. Every now and then, Every now and then, we're definitely not by a kelp forest. Every now and then, we come across these rocks, and I'm like, we're getting closer.
Maybe if they're covered in urchins.
Yeah.
So funny.
I think we're going to have to cross an ocean basin in order to get there.
Yeah. I've traveled many miles to try to find this. And for folks, again, my diving career was significantly different. I did a lot of this, where my dive instructor took me out into the ocean and I sat at the bottom just looking because, I had no natural skill to diving, but still gave it a nice try.
Yeah, it's diving is amazing. I think it's something I haven't done in a couple of years, but that feeling when you're underwater, especially on the bottom, and just like for me, it was just sitting on the bottom and just taking in kind of this watery world around you. It's just something that's so calming and centering, and definitely recommend it. If you have the ability, the opportunity to go diving, get out there because it's absolutely worth it. I don't know if you all feel the same way. I think Josh probably feels the same way. But
Alan, as you said that, it was like the most inspirational background music also cued with this game, and so it was a very touching moment. Yeah.
So Nintendo, if you need a spokesperson, let me know.
Yeah. Chat, please splice that, and let's make fan edits of Alan talking about how amazing the ocean is. So these are areas where I'm feeling like we're getting close, right?
Shallow water.
Yeah.
I just feel like we're just too tropical, though.
Yeah.
It's all like butterfly fish.
Yeah.
There's corals. I mean, you can get rays in cold water, but manta rays not so much.
Not so much.
Has your research taken you out away from cold water at all, or has it been mainly focused on kind of here in the Bay and everything like that?
Yeah, mostly focused in California.
Okay.
But, I am starting to look at what's going on in kelp forests and other places around the world, because kelp forest loss is not something that's unique to California. We've been seeing it in other places around the world as well. We've seen a lot more marine heat waves. So, I realize now that we've been talking about marine heat waves, but I should mention that, like heat waves on land, we can actually get heat waves in the ocean. That's what we're talking about when we say marine heat wave. But unlike heat waves on land, heat waves in the ocean can last for months or even years. And that is what's so problematic about climate change driven marine heat waves, is that they can persist for so long and be so intense that it really creates these very poor environmental conditions for kelp forests and also coral reefs.
Yeah.
These heat waves can also occur in warmer water areas.
Well, I think that's a good way that you kind of describe it, because not too long ago, like a week or so ago, we had our own little heat wave here on the Central Coast, and compared to the rest of the U.S., I'm sure it's not very much, but for us here on the Central Coast, it got hot and uncomfortable, and so I can imagine if the heat wave continued for months on end, that would cause some real serious problems and issues for the animals that are living in those conditions.
Yeah, that's right. Our heat wave on land was a couple weeks.
Yeah, right. Now it's
Yeah.
all foggy and cold, and we're back to normal.
Yeah. So for animals that live their entire life attached to the reef, they cannot move. So they have to either tolerate the warm water, or if they can't, then we lose those species.
Right. And so, I'm assuming then it's not just kelp forests that are being affected by these things. The thing that just pops in my mind, and I don't know if it's directly connected, but, you talk about like coral bleaching, right? And you have these widespread areas that are suffering because of these extremes in changes in temperature or whatever it may be. Same things might be happening, kelp forests. It's getting these extremes that they're not used to experiencing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We see these heat waves affect corals and coral reefs, also kelp forests. And these heat waves don't affect just the kelp itself. They affect other animals that depend on cold water. And we've talked a lot about sea urchins. These heat waves can also affect what the urchins are doing. So warmer water can actually cause urchins to eat more kelp. And so normally in a kelp forest, urchins are tucked away in cracks and crevices, and they're eating drift kelp. This is like leaves that have fallen off a tree. So the urchins don't have to go looking for their food. It's literally being delivered to them.
Sure.
But when there's a marine heat wave and not as much of that drift kelp, then they have to go looking for food. So they can actually change their behavior. So there are all these other consequences of marine heat waves
Sure.
on other animals that live in kelp forests.
Wow, I didn't even think about that.
Josh and Cristian, we have another great career question. Someone's asking if they're applying to an aquarium, what would be your tips or advice, what an aquarium would like to see, especially if they're applying for a diver or an exhibit educator position?
Yeah. Do you want to start with the diver question?
Yeah, so, like we've talked about, there's a lot, like even within diving, there's a lot of different career paths. There are sort of these research track paths that use scuba diving as really like a tool for collecting data and gathering information. And then there's also husbandry, animal collections.
Yep.
There's a lot of different ways that diving is being used at aquariums. And so for someone who is interested in a position that requires diving, it's really helpful, I would say, to think about how diving will be applied, and then to think about the skill set that would be required to match that. So if diving is being required for research, then it would be helpful for an applicant to have some of the kind of fundamental science skills that are taught in scientific diving. And then if an applicant is interested in applying diving towards animal collections or husbandry, then I'm sure there are other skill sets that people in those departments could probably speak to.
Yeah, definitely. And then for outreach / interpretation, I would definitely, building on some of that fundamental information / awareness of science would be helpful. Being familiar with certain ecosystems, depending on what area you're interested in applying for, may be helpful. You could look out for certain certification programs that also give you some valuable insights and experience, like naturalist, California naturalist, I believe, is one. That's specific to California. Having awareness and information and experience in social media may be helpful, depending on what aspect of communications that you're interested in, right? Fundamentals like writing, speaking, doing presentations, all of that, depending on what sort of area you want to branch out to.
Yeah, I think, having public communication, public speaking skills definitely gets you pretty far when it comes to all the different aspects of communication. Because if you have, the verbal down, that only then helps your written, and, also just knowing your audience is such a huge part of, and I'm sure Cristian can speak to this, about what we do, is just knowing who your audience is, meeting them where they are, and being able to speak on their level, regardless of whatever the subject may be. So, hopefully that answers your question. I think that's a very long answer from all of us, but thank you for your questions. We really appreciate it. This is a good question. Is there a myth or misconception about the ocean or marine animals that you'd like to debunk or address? This is a big question. Is there anything that peeks out in your mind, oh gosh, I need to talk about this?
Well, I have one.
Okay.
We talked a lot about sea urchins, and sea urchins are a grazer that belongs in the kelp forest just as much as sea otters do. The species that we've been talking about that is caused a lot of the kelp loss that we've seen, this is actually a species of sea urchin that is found here. They're supposed to live here, and so sea urchins typically can get sort of a kind of a
bad rap.
But really, there's these underlying things going on, right? Like the marine heat wave and climate change that's causing them to switch their behavior and actively graze kelp forests.
Yeah. So purple sea urchins, right, are the ones that we're really talking about. Inherently aren't evil, right, is what we're saying here. That they're just doing what they were kind of meant to do, which is graze on the algae that's available to them. Right. And they just do a really good job of that. Yeah. Based on what's available.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's... I like that. That's a good way. Because, I think just based on my time, it's oh gosh, urchins are bad. They're evil. They're decimating these kelp forests that are really, really important for everything else. Yeah. But they're just doing what they're doing.
Yeah, right. Exactly right. And that's why it's really important to have in ecosystems that have predators that can help keep those urchin populations low enough that the kelp can continue to persist. It's important to also regulate the water quality that might be discharged nearby into kelp forest. Water quality is a big factor that can ultimately influence the persistence of kelp. Sure,
and I assume with kelp being so persistent along coastal areas, that has a big kind of interaction, right? You're getting a lot of the coastal pollution or runoff or whatever it may be, and that's having a big effect on it as well. So it's not that the kelp forest already has some issues that it's dealing with underwater, but now it's getting other influences as well.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, we are wrapping up our time here. I want to thank again everyone for joining us this afternoon and joining us on our EducOCEANal gaming stream. Before we get going, Cristian, you look like you were ready to say something.
Yeah, I was going to ask Dr. Smith a question that I think I already know the answer to, because I heard you talking a lot about sort of climate change as a driving factor for some of the things that are currently impacting much of our ocean, as well as kelp forest specifically. And one thing that folks right now in the chat can do to sort of kelp forests, if you don't mind me being a little punny here, is we have, at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, we're participating in a Get Out the Vote campaign. And so we're encouraging all of our audiences, both digital, in person, as well as our staff, to all vote when applicable, because your vote up and down the ballot can make a really big impact towards kelping out our kelp forests, right? Yeah, and so us and other institutions like member institutions of Aquarium Conservation Partnership are all sort of voting and encouraging our audiences to vote ocean.
So votefortheocean.org is a website that folks can visit. You can check on your voter registration if you're registered. You can learn about your ballots and everything like that. So definitely check it out.
Yeah.
Very cool. Any last parting words before we wrap up here this afternoon? Anything you want to say that you didn't get a chance to say?
Oh, well, we're going to have to find the kelp forest next time.
There will be a part 2. We'll just have to have a part 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, with that, I want to thank you again, Cristian and Josh, for joining us here this afternoon. I know you have a very busy schedule, so we really appreciate it. We want to thank everyone else out there in the audience on Twitch, on YouTube, anyone else that's checking out the replay later. Thank you for spending some time with us here this afternoon. Stay tuned to our social channels. We've got lots of great content coming up. And we'll have another gaming live stream coming up in November, so stay tuned for that. But until then, a big thanks to Krista, Emily, and Christine behind the scenes. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.